The soft hum of machines filled the sterile hospital room, their steady beeping a cruel reminder of how fragile life could be. In the center of the room, pale and fragile beneath crisp white sheets, lay Emily Carter, the only daughter of Richard Carter, a powerful CEO known for building an empire worth billions. To the world, Richard was untouchable, a man of steel who controlled boardrooms with a glance. But tonight, as he stood by his daughter's bedside, gripping her cold hand, he looked like a man on the brink of breaking. Emily had always been his reason to keep going, the only thing that mattered beyond the endless deals and ruthless deadlines. And now, she was slipping away before his eyes. Doctors moved in and out with forced calmness, their clipped voices and hurried steps betraying the urgency of the situation. They had run every test, tried every possible treatment, and yet Emily's condition only worsened. Her breathing grew shallow, her skin clammy, and an unspoken fear crept into the room, that she wouldn't last the night. Richard's heart pounded as he stared at the 4-drip connected to her arm, delivering what was supposed to be life-saving medication. He wanted to trust the experts, but a quiet unease gnawed at him. Something felt wrong. In the corner, almost invisible in her plain uniform, stood Maria, the Carter family's maid. She had worked for them for years, quietly managing household duties, always in the background, never in the spotlight. But tonight she couldn't stay silent. Her gaze kept darting to the 4-line, to the faint discoloration of the liquid running into Emily's veins. She didn't understand medicine, but she trusted her instincts. And right now, every instinct screamed that something was terribly, horribly off. Richard barely noticed her at first, lost in his own panic. But when Maria suddenly gasped, her voice breaking the suffocating silence, everyone froze. "Stop!" she cried, her voice trembling but loud enough to make every head turn. "The 4, something's wrong with it. It's poisoned." For a moment, the room erupted into chaos. Nurses rushed to check the 4, doctors barked orders, and Richard spun around to face her, his eyes a mix of shock and fury. "What did you just say?" he demanded. Maria's hands shook as she pointed at the drip, her heart hammering in her chest. She didn't have proof, just a gut feeling and the memory of seeing a stranger near Emily's room earlier that evening. Time seemed to slow as one of the doctors disconnected the 4 and examined it. Their face went pale. Richard's breath caught in his throat. Could it be true? Could someone have deliberately tried to harm his daughter in a place meant to save lives? And then, just as the doctor opened his mouth to speak, a loud crash echoed from the hallway outside, followed by hurried footsteps running away. Richard's eyes darted to the door and Maria whispered, "That's the man I saw." The truth was about to unravel, but none of them were prepared for what they would find next. Richard's pulse pounded in his ears as he bolted toward the hallway, his expensive shoes slipping slightly on the polished floor. The hospital corridor, normally a place of quiet urgency, now felt like a maze of shadows and echoes. The sound of footsteps faded around a corner, but by the time he reached it, there was nothing, no one. Just a long, empty hall lined with closed doors and dim overhead lights flickering like nervous eyes. He turned back toward the room, his chest tightening with every step. Inside, Maria stood stiffly near the door, her fingers clutching the fabric of her uniform. She looked terrified, as though she had just crossed an invisible line she could never return from. Richard's gaze locked on her, sharp and unrelenting. "Who was that man?" he asked, his voice low but charged with fury. Maria hesitated, swallowing hard. I don't know his name," she admitted softly. "But I saw him earlier tonight. He wasn't wearing hospital clothes. He was by Emily's room. He looked like he was checking the 4 bag. When I came closer, he walked away quickly." Her words trembled, but her eyes didn't waver. Richard felt a cold dread seep into his bones. If what she was saying was true, this wasn't just a medical crisis. It was an attack. But why? Who would want to harm his daughter? He had made countless enemies in business over the years, but this was different. This was personal. The doctor who had examined the four stepped forward, his face pale. "Mr. Carter," he began carefully, "there's something in this solution that shouldn't be there. We're running tests to confirm what it is, but you were right to stop it." His voice was steady, but Richard heard the unease beneath it. The realization hit him like a blow. If Maria hadn't spoken up, Emily might already be gone. Richard glanced at his daughter. Her breathing was still shallow, but without the tainted four, she seemed slightly less pale, as if clinging to life by the thinnest thread. His jaw tightened. Whoever had done this would pay. Suddenly, Maria spoke again, her voice hesitant. "Mr. Carter, I think I've seen that man before. Not here but near your home, weeks ago. I didn't think much of it then." Her words sent a chill through him. Was this planned long before tonight? How deep did this go? He opened his mouth to respond, but a nurse entered abruptly, holding a clipboard, her face ashen. "Security checked the cameras," she said quietly. "The feed for this floor went dark about 30 minutes ago. Someone tampered with it." The room fell silent. Richard's mind raced. Whoever they were dealing with wasn't just bold. They were organized. And still out there. Maria glanced nervously toward the door. "He's not done," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. Richard didn't correct her. Deep down he knew she was right. This was only the beginning. Richard stood at the window of the hospital room, staring out at the city lights beyond the glass. To anyone else it was a breathtaking view, a skyline glowing with wealth and power. To him it felt like a battlefield. Every deal he had made, every rival he had crushed, seemed to echo back at him now. He couldn't shake the thought that this attack on Emily might not be random, might be a message. Behind him, Maria sat in a chair near the corner, wringing her hands. She kept glancing at Emily, who lay unconscious, and then at Richard, as if debating whether to speak again. Finally she whispered, "Do you think this has something to do with your company?" Richard turned sharply, his eyes narrowing. "What do you mean?" Maria hesitated, but the memory of the man in the hallway gave her courage. "I've worked for you for years, Mr. Carter. I've heard things. Not on purpose, just in passing. Meetings at the house, phone calls late at night. Lately you've been worried. Different. Is there someone who'd go this far to hurt you?" Her words hit closer to home than she realized. For months, Richard had been locked in a brutal corporate war. A new biotech competitor had been trying to undercut his company's biggest project, a groundbreaking medical treatment. Billions were at stake, and he had made enemies. But targeting Emily, that crossed a line he hadn't believed anyone would dare. Before he could answer, the door opened and Detective Laura Hayes stepped inside. Tall with sharp eyes that missed nothing, she introduced herself quickly and got to the point. "We've locked down this floor," she said, her tone brisk. "But whoever sabotaged that four knew what they were doing. They left no prints, no trace. I need to ask you some questions, Mr. Carter. And you too," she added, glancing at Maria. Maria straightened, nervous but determined. Richard gave a curt nod. "Ask what you need." As the detective began, another thread of tension pulled tight. Down the hall, in the hospital security room, a technician stared at the screen showing the camera feeds. All of them were active now except one. The camera outside Emily's room had briefly flickered again, just for a second. Enough to show a shadow moving past the door. Unaware of the new danger, Richard answered the detective's questions, but his mind was elsewhere. He kept thinking about Maria's earlier words, about seeing that man near his home. Had Emily been watched for weeks? Was someone close to him feeding information to the enemy? Maria, for her part, couldn't stop replaying the moment she had seen the stranger earlier that night. She had only caught a glimpse of his face, but there was something about his eyes, cold, calculating, that made her skin crawl. And then, from Emily's bed, a weak sound broke the tense silence. A whisper barely audible. "Daddy!" Everyone froze. Emily's eyes fluttered open for just a second, and in a trembling voice she added, He was here. The room went utterly still. Whoever had tried to kill her wasn't finished. And now she had seen him. Richard's heart stopped for a moment at Emily's fragile words. He rushed to her bedside, gripping her small hand gently. "Emily," he whispered, his voice trembling despite himself. "Who was here? What did you see?" Emily's lips quivered as she tried to speak again, but exhaustion dragged her under before she could answer. Her head sank back into the pillow, and the monitor by her bed beeped steadily, a cruel reminder that time was running out. Detective Hayes exchanged a glance with Richard. "This changes everything," she said, her voice low but urgent. "If she saw him, then he knows she's a witness. He won't stop." Those words sent a shiver down Maria's spine. She stood and crossed her arms tightly over her chest, her mind racing. "We need to protect her," she said, surprising even herself with the firmness in her tone. "If he comes back." "He won't get the chance," Richard cut in, though his voice lacked conviction. He looked at his daughter's pale face and felt something he hadn't in years, fear that no amount of money or influence could erase. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from somewhere below the floor, metal on metal, harsh and startling. The lights flickered, plunging the room into a brief, suffocating darkness before buzzing back to life. Everyone froze. Detective Hayes grabbed her radio. "Security report," she barked, but only static replied. She tried again with the same result. "Something's interfering with our comms," she muttered, her eyes scanning the room. Richard's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out and glanced at the screen. No caller ID. Against his better judgment, he answered. A distorted voice crackled through the speaker. "You should have stayed out of this, Carter. Now you'll lose everything." The line went dead. Richard stared at the phone, his hand tightening until his knuckles turned white. He had no idea how the caller had bypassed hospital security to reach him, but one thing was clear. They were inside this building and they were watching. Detective Hayes moved to the door, signaling for everyone to stay quiet. She opened it just a crack, peering into the hallway. It was empty. Too empty. She motioned for Richard and Maria to stay close as she stepped out to investigate, her other hand resting on the small sidearm at her belt. Inside the room, Maria edged closer to Emily's bed, her nerves stretched to breaking point. The soft hiss of the oxygen machine was the only sound until, faintly, she heard it. A step. Slow, deliberate, coming closer. She glanced at Richard, who had heard them too. His face hardened as he realized what was happening. The attacker hadn't fled the hospital. He was still here, moving toward them. The lights flickered again, this time longer, as if the building itself was holding its breath. In that dim glow, a shadow crossed the frosted glass panel of the door, tall, broad, and unmistakably human. Maria's breath caught. Richard instinctively stepped in front of Emily's bed. And then, without warning, the door handle began to turn. The handle turned slowly, deliberate and taunting, before stopping mid-motion. The silence that followed was worse than the sound itself, an oppressive, suffocating quiet that made every second feel like an hour. Richard's pulse thundered in his ears as he tightened his stance, ready to shield his daughter from whatever waited on the other side. Maria gripped the edge of the bed, her knuckles white, her breath shallow. Suddenly, Detective Hayes' voice cut through the tension from the hallway. "Step away from that door," she shouted, her tone sharp and commanding. A scuffle broke out outside. Heavy footsteps, a grunt, something crashing against the wall. Then a gunshot echoed down the corridor, deafening in its closeness. Maria screamed softly, and Richard instinctively crouched lower by Emily's side, praying she wouldn't wake to this nightmare. Moments later, Hayes burst back into the room, her face flushed, her breathing hard. "He's gone," she said grimly, holstering her weapon. "Slipped through a maintenance shaft. He knows this building better than anyone." Richard stared at her. "Anyone? What do you mean?" Hayes hesitated, glancing toward the door as if weighing how much to say. "This isn't just an intruder," she admitted finally. "The man we're dealing with." I think he's someone from inside this hospital. Maybe even someone you know. The words hit like a sledgehammer. Richard's mind reeled. Someone from inside. Someone with access to his daughter's room, to security feeds, to the building itself? It explained the sabotaged cameras, the tampered for. But it also meant they were surrounded by potential enemies. Maria's voice trembled as she spoke up. I saw his eyes through the glass. I swear I've seen them before. Not at your home, Mr. Carter. Here. Around the hospital. Hayes nodded. That matches what I've suspected. We've had unexplained incidents here for months. Equipment failures, medications disappearing. I think this has been planned for a long time. Before Richard could respond, his phone buzzed again, this time with a text message. He opened it and his blood ran cold. It was a photo of Emily taken from above as she lay in this very bed. But the photo was timestamped just 2 minutes ago. They're watching us right now, he whispered, showing Hayes the screen. She swore under her breath and moved quickly to the blinds, yanking them shut, then scanning the room for hidden cameras. Maria backed away, her chest tight with panic, until her heel hit something under the bed. She reached down, fingers brushing against a small black device no bigger than a matchbox. Hayes snatched it up, her expression darkening. Micro camera, she muttered. Whoever planted this knows every move we make. And then, before anyone could speak again, Emily stirred and whispered, barely audible. It's not just him. There's more than one. The room went utterly still. Outside in the corridor, the lights went out completely, plunging the entire floor into darkness. Total darkness swallowed the room, the kind that made it impossible to tell where safety ended and danger began. Richard could hear Emily's faint breathing, Maria's quick gasps, and the soft click of Detective Hayes' weapon being drawn. Stay down, Hayes ordered quietly, her voice a low anchor in the chaos. Then footsteps, not one set, several, moving swiftly, confidently, from opposite ends of the hallway. Richard's stomach twisted. Emily had been right. There wasn't just one attacker, there were more. Suddenly, emergency lights flickered on, bathing the corridor outside in a dull red glow. Through the small glass panel on the door, shadows passed. 3 figures dressed in hospital scrubs, their faces hidden by masks. They stopped directly outside the room. The door rattled violently as someone tried to force it open. Hayes motioned for silence, then leaned close to Richard. There's a service exit through the adjoining room, she whispered. We have to move. Now. Richard scooped Emily into his arms, feeling her tiny body against his chest. Maria stayed close as Hayes led them into the next room, quietly shutting the connecting door behind them. They moved fast, but as they neared the service exit, a tall figure stepped out of the shadows, blocking their path. Richard froze. He recognized the man instantly. Dr. Alan Pierce, the hospital's chief of research, someone Richard had trusted for years. Alan! Richard's voice was raw with disbelief. Why? Pierce's calm smile was chilling. Because you took everything, he said quietly. Your company destroyed my work, my career. Tonight I take something back. Before Richard could respond, Hayes lunged at Pierce, knocking his weapon away as they struggled. Another masked figure burst into the room, but Maria, acting on pure instinct, grabbed a metal tray and swung it with all her strength, sending him crashing to the floor. Richard bolted for the exit with Emily, but Pierce broke free from Hayes and grabbed his arm. You won't leave here alive, he hissed. In that moment, Emily stirred in Richard's arms and whispered, Daddy, behind you. Richard twisted just in time to see another attacker raising a syringe. He kicked out, sending the man sprawling, and Hayes fired a single shot into the ceiling, startling the remaining assailants long enough to force them back. They burst through the service door into the night air as security alarms finally blared throughout the hospital. Police swarmed in moments later, catching the attackers as they tried to escape. Pierce was dragged away in handcuffs, his expression still one of cold hatred. Richard held Emily close as paramedics checked her, relief washing over him like a tide. Maria stood nearby, shaking but unhurt, her eyes meeting his with quiet strength. And just when it seemed over, Richard's phone buzzed again. A new message appeared on the screen. This was only a warning. Next time we won't miss. He looked up at the flashing lights of police cars and realized with a chill that this fight was far from finished. The flashing red and blue lights painted the hospital walls in restless colors as officers moved in and out, securing the building. Richard sat on a bench just outside the emergency wing, Emily resting against him, her tiny hand clutching his shirt as if afraid he might disappear. For the first time in hours, she was stable, breathing evenly, her pale cheeks showing the faintest trace of warmth. Detective Hayes approached, her expression firm but not unkind. "Pierce and the others are in custody," she said. "We found evidence linking them to a larger network, corporate espionage, sabotage, even other attacks disguised as medical errors. This wasn't just about you, Mr. Carter. But your daughter, she was their leverage." Richard nodded, his jaw tightening. "She's alive. That's all that matters." But even as he said it, he couldn't ignore the lingering message on his phone. He knew this wasn't truly over, but tonight they had survived. Maria stood nearby, her hands clasped in front of her. She still looked shaken, but there was a quiet determination in her eyes. When Richard caught her gaze, he rose and walked over. "You saved my daughter's life," he said simply. "I won't forget that." Maria shook her head. "I just did what anyone would do." "No," Richard replied firmly. "Most people would have stayed silent. You didn't. You saw what no one else did." He hesitated, then added, "When all this is over, I want you to know. You'll always have a place with us. Not as a maid. As family." Maria's eyes welled up, but she only nodded, unable to find words. Hayes broke the moment with a quiet cough. "We'll keep security on Emily until this network is fully dismantled. But you should know, Mr. Carter, your company will come under investigation too. Some of the practices that sparked this may lead back to decisions made at the top." Richard didn't flinch. For years, he had built walls around his heart and justified every ruthless choice for the sake of success. But tonight, staring at Emily and remembering how close he came to losing her, those walls cracked. "Then I'll face whatever comes," he said quietly. "I'm done pretending business is worth more than people." As dawn broke, soft light spilling across the parking lot, Richard carried Emily to the car waiting to take them home. Maria followed, glancing back at the hospital one last time. Inside, Hayes watched them go, her thoughts lingering on the fight ahead. For Richard, the road forward would be long, rebuilding trust, protecting Emily, and dismantling the enemies still lurking in the shadows. But as he glanced at his daughter sleeping peacefully in his arms, he felt something he hadn't in years: hope. And somewhere deep inside, he knew that no threat, no enemy, no amount of power could ever break what had kept them alive tonight: courage, loyalty, and love.